On January 14, 1973, the Daily News published a sweeping analysis of the precarious state of the Mafia's 5 families in New York City. With increasing law enforcement pressure, internal power struggles, and the looming uncertainty of Don Carlo Gambino's health, 1973 was predicted to be a turning point. The article detailed the rising tensions within the Gambino family and potential successors, including Paul Castellano and Agnello Della Croce, while highlighting key figures like Natale Evola of the Bonanza family. The piece underscored the resilience of organized crime despite relentless crackdowns and anticipated continued conflict in the event of Gambino's death. Here is the article in full. In the past 12 months, the 5 families of the New York Mafia have been racked by internecine war, harassed by federal, state, and local arrests, needled by subpoenas, discombobulated by a stern mayoral order to drive the gangsters out of town. In fact, subjected to even more scandals and shake-ups than their opposite number, the police, who didn't have a very good year either. But a survey by the News of Law Enforcement Mafia Watchers discloses that 1972 may have been just a gentle curtain raiser to 1973, all depending on the ailing heart in the sunken chest of a 73-year-old man. The ferocious invalid is Super Don Carlo Gambino, New York boss of bosses and member of the National Mafia Council, who influences not only the other local families, but also crime clans across the country and in Canada. If anything happens to that shaky heart in 1973, Mafia authorities predict an old-fashioned gang war to seize the white-on-white mantle of leadership. It is the feeling of authorities in the law enforcement field that Gambino has stripped their individuality and pride from other families, says a federal intelligence report. It is felt that a full-scale war could evolve following Gambino's death by the various families in an attempt to regain their lost prestige and to again assume their own identity. There are already waves of unrest emanating from various factions in these families. Gambino made it where he is today by terror, intrigue, and simple longevity, and in the process has built up the largest mafia group in criminal history. At a snapping of Don Carlo's bony fingers, 4,000 gunmen could take to the streets against any foe. Of the 4,000, some 1,000 are full mafiosi, known as made guys, button men, or good fellows. These elite of hoodlums must be Italians who have taken the blood oath and the oath of omertà, silence. A second echelon, consisting of 2,000 members who may be of any nationality, includes some millionaires. Big-time gamblers and loan sharks are listed in this category. A third echelon, about 1,000 strong, boasts a strong lacing of native Sicilians called wetbacks or greasers by the Italian-American mafiosi. Gambino began importing them into this country about 5 years ago, and they owe complete allegiance to him. However, they pose no threats to the button men, lacking the smarts to operate sophisticated big-time operations like narcotics, shylocking, gambling, stolen securities, counterfeiting, and fencing. In all these lucrative activities, not only in New York City but also in many states across the country, Don Carlo personally collects 25% of the profits. Despite this staggering income, he lives modestly in a Brooklyn apartment and a waterside home in Massapequa, Long Island. On the island, it pleases his fancy to invite neighborhood youngsters into his home for homemade Italian food and to play the role of a nice, fatherly old man. "He talks to the kids and is very friendly," one Long Island teenager reported. "You just can't believe he's all the things people say about him." Like many great men, Don Carlo can't quite face up to the fact that the mob can live on without him, according to a federal intelligence report, and has not chosen his successor. At least 3 members of the family believe themselves to be the legitimate heir, and a 4th is considered a dark horse for the leadership. Della Croce is in jail. Until recently, it had been assumed that Agnello O'Neill Della Croce would take over, but O'Neill, or Hogan as he prefers to be called for some reason, is currently serving a year on Rikers Island for contempt, is on trial for income tax charges, and isn't well liked by the rest of the Gambino family hierarchy. They criticize him for having a violent temper and lacking intelligence. The others in contention for the leadership are Vincent, Jimmy Brown, Failla, Paul Castellano, who is Gambino's brother-in-law, and the dark horse, Joseph Gallo, no relation to Crazy Joe Gallo, who is described by police as cunning. However, a complicated factor is the fact that Della Croce controls his own small army of adherents quartered in the Ravenite Social Club on Mulberry Street. If Failla, Castellano, or Joseph Gallo were to grab for the mantle, they might start shooting. To make the murky mafia waters even murkier, let us now consider a complete outsider from one of the other 5 families who has the potential for leadership. He is 60-year-old Natale Evola of 972 Bay Parkway, Brooklyn, known in the underworld as Joe Diamond. It was Evola who put back together the pieces of the hopelessly splintered family of Joseph, Joe Bananas, Bonanno, and made it once again a functioning crime clan. Today, in respect, if not size, the Bonanno family ranks second only to the Gambino family, and Evola's flair for organization has not gone unnoticed. Evola controls a family with 180 button men and about 250 members in other echelons, maintaining strong contacts in Canada through Vincent Cotroni in Montreal. The Bonanno family is considered a prime importer of heroin, and under Evola's management has made inroads into gambling, loan sharking, extortion, and trucking rackets in the garment center. According to intelligence reports, Evola prefers to maintain a low profile, but is described as relatively bright and crafty. Each weekday, he leaves his Brooklyn home early and is driven to the Amity Trucking Company at 307 West 38th Street in Manhattan. His brother, Joseph Evola, who has no police record, is listed as the president of the firm. Evola spends most of the day in the garment district, often lunching at the Mannequin or Morgan restaurants, and frequently patronizing Bobby's Bar at 205 West 38th Street. The new underboss of the Renaissance Bonanno family is Philip Rusty Rastelli, a rough 54-year-old gunslinger from the Williamsburg section of Brooklyn. Rastelli holds an unusual distinction, even in mafia circles. He was once suspected of ordering a hit on his own wife. A decade ago, Mrs. Rastelli made the mistake of shooting her husband with his weapon during a domestic misunderstanding. 3 months later, she was found shot to death in a hallway. Her grieving husband had a cop-proof alibi. Third in the new setup of this up-and-coming family is Pete, Nicky Glasses, Marangelo, 61, of 15 Troutman Avenue in the Bronx, whom Evola has designated as consigliere, counsel. While this family ranks second to the Gambino clan in respect, the number 2 family, numerically speaking, with 240 button men and 750 associates, is the old Genovese family. Not so long ago, the most outstanding name in the Genovese family was Don Vito Genovese himself, and under his leadership, the family increased its power and influence significantly. However, Don Vito went to prison and died there in 1969, and the family began losing influence, primarily because of weak leadership. It failed to prosper under Jerry Katina, 70, who is now in prison, and under Tommy Ryan Eboli, who suffered the ultimate disrespect. He was murdered in Brooklyn last summer. Things may be looking up again under Frank Funzi Thierry, who has become the full head of the family. Thierry is a close friend of both Carlo Gambino and Gambino's underboss, Aniello Della Croce. In excellent shape for his age, the 68-year-old Thierry leaves his home at 68 Bay 28th Street, Brooklyn, at 11 in the morning daily, and is driven by his chauffeur, John Russon, to the retail sales company at Spring and Varick Streets in Manhattan. There he confers with Venaro, Benny Eggs Mangano, the company president, and James, Jimmy Knapp, Napoli. Thierry then usually lunches at the Villa restaurant at 66th Street and 14th Avenue, Brooklyn, which is owned by Anthony Tuzio, a longtime friend. Like any conservative householder, Thierry is home early each evening. His buddy, Jimmy Knapp, is a 60-year-old millionaire who lives in a townhouse at 216 East 31st Street, complete with a swimming pool. An associate and not a button man, he is invaluable for his financial expertise. It is Jimmy Knapp who administers many of the family's bookmaking and numbers of operations and dabbles in professional fight fixing and horse racing. He is also the go-to man for legitimate business investments. His activities extend out onto Long Island and into Hudson County, New Jersey, where activities are supervised by Genovese family capo Anthony Bobby Manor. In addition to Jimmy Knapp, the Genovese family boasts other proven and wealthy members such as Peter DeFeo, Anthony, Fat Tony, Salerno, and Mike Miranda. Its racket's interests are strong in the Lower East Side and Greenwich Village, and the family controls much of the gambling and loan sharking in New Jersey. Genovese mobsters also operate in Las Vegas and Miami, which are open cities for gang members. Frankie the Bug, Caruso, and Vincent Mauro, who were leading Genovese heroin dealers, have now been released from prison, and law enforcement groups are warily anticipating renewed activity in the narcotics field. Before Crazy Joe Gallo was assassinated, he and Frankie the Bug were often seen together in Little Italy. Many investigators suspect that Gallo was using drugs and planning to launch his small mob into narcotics, pushing when he was so rudely and permanently interrupted. Frankie the Bug isn't around anymore either. Heat from the Federal Bureau of Investigation has driven him out of New York, and he is now living in Florida. You can largely blame, or thank, Crazy Joe Gallo for the current pathetic condition of the local mafia family that was formerly headed by Joseph Colombo Sr. The murder attempt on Colombo, which was engineered by Crazy Joe, has left Colombo completely incapacitated. There has also been an internecine war that racked 18 murders, leaving the Colombo family stumbling around in search of strong leadership. Joseph, Joe Iacovelli, succeeded Colombo as leader of the family, but due to technical difficulties, he has been unable to act. Iacovelli is on the run from a murder charge in New Jersey and is also wanted for questioning in the murder of Crazy Joe Gallo last April at Umberto's Clam Bar. One of the suspected killers, Carmine, Sonny Pinto, DiBiase, drove to Iacovelli's apartment in Nyack after the killing with 2 other men. He is believed to be hiding with Iacovelli. The acting head of the Colombo family now is Vincent Alloy, a bespectacled, elegantly dressed man who prefers to pass himself off as a business executive. Each year, he buys a new Cadillac and dutifully reports an income of $90,000 to the Internal Revenue Service. Alloy really didn't want the honor of directing 120 button men and 250 lower echelon members, but he was forced to accept the job by his father, Sebastian Buster Alloy, a semi-retired advisor to the Colombo family. Alloy lives on a family estate in Blooming Grove, New York, commuting from there to the Colombo crime base in Brooklyn and to Miami, where he spends most of his time in conversation with his father. In Miami, he's often seen at the plush Fontainebleau or Doral Beach Hotel, and in Manhattan, he frequents Ferrara's Bakery in Little Italy, sipping espresso with the bake shop owners Anthony and Albert Lepore. As an indication that Alloy does not truly have his heart in his job, a Brooklyn detective recalls how Alloy reacted to a routine questioning several years ago. "We pulled his car over for a check," the detective relates. Alloy rolled down the window and said, "You got me." He handed over the works, gambling records and money. We hadn't even suspected that he was carrying anything. A rising figure in the Colombo family is 42-year-old Nicholas Bianco, a protégé of jailed New England mafia boss Raymond Patriarca, who dispatched Bianco a decade ago to mediate the war between the Gallo brothers gang and the old Profaci mob. A few years later, Bianco joined the Colombo family and now heads a 10-man crew specializing in loan sharking and burglary. Carlo Gambino exerts heavy influence on the New England Mafia, according to federal intelligence sources. They believe that with Don Carlo's backing, Bianco will return to that area and take control. Not coincidentally, Bianco still maintains a home in Barrington, Rhode Island. Another prominent figure in the somewhat disorganized Colombo family is Nicholas Jiggs Forlano, who is currently under indictment in Manhattan for money-lending activities. Jiggs specializes in loan sharking and gambling, and also serves as the Mafia's liaison with Hugh Mulligan's Irish mob. There was deep grieving within the family when John Sonny Franzese was sentenced to 50 years in prison on an armed robbery charge. But business is business, and his spot was quickly filled by Joseph Brancato. Brancato directs a 30-man crew that operates in Queens and Long Island. However, Franzese still enjoys a boss-like status, receiving a cut of the group's profits from gambling, loan sharking, and other criminal activities. Still another Colombo capo who directs a crew of about the same size is 55-year-old Ernest Leponzina, who finds himself in an unusual position. One of Ernest Leponzina's crew, Joseph Joe Lane, Gentile, of 1662 65th Street, Brooklyn, is merely a family associate. But as an underworld untouchable, he enjoys much higher status than his nominal boss, Leponzina. This rare prestige derives from Gentile's exceptional financial ability to turn an illegal profit into legitimate business and otherwise maneuver financially for the mob. In the Genovese family, James Jimmy Knapp Napoli holds the same elevated standing. The dapper Gentile, who is considered a millionaire many times over, is often spotted at Roosevelt or Yonkers Raceway, typically at the $100 betting window. When he was recently charged by the Federal Bureau of Investigation with running a $50 million a year gambling and loan sharking operation, bank records listing more than $100,000 in deposits were discovered in his home. By far the most vicious of the 7 group chiefs in the Colombo family is Alfonso Aliboy Persico, 43, who succeeded his brother Carmine, the Snake Persico, as the top enforcer of a 35-man crew. According to law enforcement units, it is the most powerful in the family. Early last year, when it became clear that Carmine was heading for a lengthy stretch in the federal penitentiary in Atlanta, he wanted his brother Aliboy to take over his crew. It was more than mere brotherly loyalty. Aliboy had just been paroled after serving 19 years for murder. However, despite his impressive credentials, there was a complication. A crew head must be a buttonman, and no new buttonmen have been made in New York since 1957. To circumvent this restriction, Aliboy was temporarily assigned to a mafia family in a neighboring state, where he took the unholy oath. That family then reassigned him to the Colombo group. Aliboy's importance to the mob is reflected in the level of protection surrounding him. Last April, the FBI arrested him on a road near the family hideout in Saugerties, New York, and discovered that his car was being followed by a second vehicle, providing rear protection. In this second car was Charles Moose Panarella, 50, a full Colombo capo described as a loan shark's loan shark. According to authorities, Panarella had a fully loaded .38 caliber pistol in his car at the time. Under Aliboy's leadership, the crew has prospered in hijacking, extortion, loan sharking, and fencing stolen securities. However, prosperity has not distracted him from his primary obsessional blood feud with the 3 Gallo brothers, Joseph, Larry, and Albert. The hatred dates back over a decade to the war between the Gallos and the old Profati mob, for whom Carmine the Snake Persico worked as a button man. One night during this war, Carmine caught Larry Gallo in a bar and was attempting to garrote him when a surprise police raid saved Larry's life. The war cooled off when Joey Gallo was sent to prison. Later, Larry Gallo died of throat cancer. Nonetheless, from prison, Joey passed on word that once he was released, he would seek vengeance against Persico and Joe Colombo, who had taken over as boss of the Profaci mob. Early in 1971, Joey was paroled, and several months later, Joe Colombo was shot in the head while addressing the second annual rally of the Italian-American Civil Rights League in Columbus Circle. The gunman, a black man named Jerome Johnson, was killed as he attempted to flee. The police, the FBI, and the Colombo family all believe that Johnson had been hired by Joey Gallo. Only a few days before the shooting, Joey Gallo had warned some police officers he knew to stay up high if they were assigned to the rally. Thus, the attempted assassination triggered a rip-roaring gang war that claimed 18 lives, including Joey Gallo's. There would have been little public clamor if not for the fact that two of the victims were innocent businessmen killed by mistake. The previously undisclosed background of these wanton murders can now be revealed. Remember Joe Gentile, the man of respect in the Colombo family, who was considered an untouchable? Well, a prophet is not without honor except in his own household. Gentile was having trouble with his son-in-law, Dominic, Donnie Shax Montemarino. Donnie Shax, a lower echelon hood, was divorcing Gentile's daughter and even threatened the older man's life when he protested. Gentile formally demanded a sit-down to resolve the issue, and because of his high stature, a meeting was arranged for Friday, August 11th at the Neapolitan Noodle Restaurant at 320 East 79th Street. Since Donnie Shax worked for Carmine Persico, it was agreed that Ali Boy Persico would represent him, while Ernie Laponzina would speak on behalf of Gentile. A number of other notable figures were also expected to attend, including Joe Iacovelli and Vincent Alloy, the top men in the Colombo family. The first to arrive at the restaurant were Ali Boy Persico, Carmine's son Alfonso, a cousin named Salvatore Persico, a retired plainclothes police officer licensed to carry a gun, and Jerry Langella. They positioned themselves at the bar, where they were spotted by a lookout for the Gallo gang. This lookout relayed the information to a hit man, believed to be an out-of-towner hired by Albert, Kid Blast Gallo. However, the foursome soon left the bar and moved to a table in a rear room, where they were joined by Dominic Mimi Cialo, Montemarino, and Charlie Panarella. A few minutes later, Gentile and Laponzina arrived. Joe Iacovelli and Vincent Alloy were still en route. At the bar, the foursome was succeeded by 4 meat executives enjoying a night out with their wives. The hitman, armed with 2.38 caliber pistols, fired directly into them, mistakenly targeting the wrong group. 2 of the executives, Sheldon Epstein, 40, and Max Tekelch, 48, were killed. The other 2, Leon Schneider, 48, and Jack Forum, 55, escaped with superficial wounds. The gunman fled the scene. In the rear room, investigators found one table overturned as if used as a barricade. This was the table where the 9 Colombo hoods had been sitting. The mistaken killings sparked a wave of public outrage, prompting Mayor Lindsay to order the police to drive the hoods out of town. Deputy Commissioner William McCarthy joined forces with the Federal Bureau of Investigation and federal task forces, particularly the active Brooklyn group led by Dennis Dillon, to increase pressure on the mob. Even the aged Don Carlo Gambino intervened. Previously silent during the shooting war, Gambino reportedly ordered both sides to end the killings, according to intelligence sources. The war eventually ended, but not a moment too soon for the Gallo gang. After losing most of their men in the conflict, their numbers dwindled to only 8 or 9 members, with just one button man among them, John Cutrone. They now survive on scraps from gambling, loan sharking, and extortion rackets, while their leader, Kid Blast, a chess enthusiast, occasionally challenges law enforcement officers to matches. However, tensions remain high. Persico, a swaggering punk with a penchant for bar fights, and the crafty Kid Blast would not pass up an opportunity to eliminate each other if given the chance. Now we turn to the smallest and oldest mafia family in town, the Lucchese family. With only 59 members, only 2 of whom are under the age of 50, it may seem insignificant, but per member, it is the wealthiest family in the mafia. Following the death of Thomas Lucchese several years ago, Carmine, Mr. Gribb's, Tramunti, a fat but not jolly man, took over as acting head of this rich yet aging family. Tramunti lives modestly. Every morning between 9:30 and 10:30, he leaves his home in Whitestone, Queens, and is driven in a discreet 1968 two-door bronze Buick to a social club at 114th Street and Pleasant Avenue in Manhattan. He then visits the Harlem Pet Shop at 112th Street and 2nd Avenue, where he spends an hour with button man Sam Cavalieri. Later, Tramunti travels downtown to the Eiffel Classic Dress Company at 263 West 38th Street, in which he has a quarter interest. He often rounds out his day by visiting an Italian social club at 3042 Westchester Avenue in the Bronx, and occasionally drops in at several clubs he owns in Manhattan. Listed in this tight little family are such luminaries as Anthony, Tony Ducks, Corallo, John, Johnny Dio, Dio Guardi, and John, Big John, Ormento, the infamous dope czar, all of whom are currently in prison. Another family member is Paul Vario Sr., who is in significant legal trouble due to an electronic listening device planted in his Brooklyn trailer headquarters. This device, famously known as the Gold Bug, was named after Brooklyn District Attorney Eugene Gold. The venerable Lucchese family was founded back in 1909 as the East 107th Street Gang by Thomas Lucchese and Stefano Steve La Sala. Remarkably, La Sala is still alive at the age of 84, making him the town's oldest mafioso. Although retired, La Sala often visits the old neighborhood haunts, where he is treated with immense respect. Another elder statesman of the family is Vincent, Vinny, Roa, the mafia's oldest consigliere at 77. Roa resides in a luxurious estate in Dunwoody and is still known to frequent nightclubs, including Trenchies in Yonkers. In addition to its age and wealth, this family of old-timers holds another claim to power, a close connection to the Gambino family. This bond was cemented through the marriage of Don Carlo Gambino's son Thomas to the daughter of Thomas Lucchese. This brings us back to the critical question of 1973. Will Don Carlo's heart hold out? And if not, what will happen? The best combined opinion from law enforcement intelligence groups suggests that new leadership could come either from within the Gambino family or from Natale Evola, the head of the resurgent Bonanza family. One thing is certain, however. Despite the relentless pressure from Police Commissioner McCarthy, prosecutors like Manhattan District Attorney Frank Hogan and Brooklyn District Attorney Eugene Gold, and federal task force leaders such as Dennis Dillon and Michael Shaw, the mafia will continue to flourish. And why wouldn't it? As one federal agent bluntly put it, where else can they get that kind of money without working?